A pregnant woman sits alone in a freezing basement. Above her head, crystal chandeliers sparkle. Champagne flows. 300 guests toast
Thank you
her
all so
husband's
much for
birthday,
being here tonight.
completely unaware
To
that
health,
he locked his
happiness,
7-month
and
pregnant
continued
wife in the
success.
darknesses just hours before. She has no phone, no way to call for help, and contractions are starting. But here is what her
The sooner
millionaire
you
husband
cooperate,
does
the
not
easier
know.
this will be.
She has been
Don't
watching
do
him
this,
for
Victor.
months.
Think
She
about
has
the
been
baby,
documenting
please.
every lie, every secret bank account,
Isabella.
every late-night phone call to his mistress.
I
She knows what
finally
really
found you.
happened to his first wife, the one who
I'm so
drowned under
sorry.
mysterious circumstances. And somewhere out there, a billionaire is racing against time to save her. A billionaire with a secret connection to this woman that will change everything. What happens when the basement door finally opens? Who will be standing on the other side? And what shocking truth will bring this millionaire's empire crashing down in front of everyone he knows? Stay with me until the end, because this story takes turns that no one saw coming. If you are listening to this, if anyone ever finds this recording, my name is Isabella Whitmore. I am 7 months pregnant, and my husband just locked me in the basement of our home while 200 people celebrate his birthday upstairs. The words formed in the darkness, whispered into the cold air of the basement where Isabella sat huddled against a concrete wall. Her voice was barely audible, trembling with fear and exhaustion. Above her head, muffled music pulsed through the structure of the house like the heartbeat of some indifferent beast. Laughter filtered down through layers of wood and stone, distant and cruel. The sounds of a party in full swing while she shivered alone in the dark. He thinks I am nobody. He thinks I have no one. But he made one mistake. Isabella paused, her hand pressing against her swollen belly where her baby shifted restlessly, as if sensing the danger they were both in. She felt the movement and allowed herself a moment of connection with the life growing inside her. Despite everything, despite the cold and the fear and the betrayal, this child was still fighting, and so would she. He forgot that I have been watching, and I have been writing everything down. 6 hours earlier, the Whitmore estate had blazed with light like a beacon of wealth and success visible for miles. The mansion sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds in the most exclusive neighborhood in the state, a testament to Victor Whitmore's business empire and his carefully cultivated image of power. Crystal chandeliers scattered rainbow fragments across marble floors that had been polished to a mirror shine. A string quartet played elegantly in the corner of the grand ballroom, their classical music providing a sophisticated backdrop for the conversations of the wealthy and influential. Fresh flowers had been flown in from 3 different countries. The champagne was vintage, the caviar was imported, and everything about the evening had been designed to remind every guest exactly how successful Victor Whitmore had become. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway in a display of automotive wealth. Bentleys and Rolls-Royces and Mercedes sat gleaming under strategically placed lights. A red Ferrari occupied the most prominent spot, belonging to someone who clearly wanted to be noticed. Valets in crisp uniforms moved with practiced efficiency, handling keys to cars worth more than most people's houses. 300 guests filled the mansion that night. Men in designer suits that cost more than the average monthly salary stood in clusters discussing market trends and investment opportunities. Women dripping with diamonds and designer gowns circulated through the space, their laughter perfectly pitched, their smiles carefully maintained. These were the elite of society, the power brokers and influencers, the people who shaped the world from the comfort of their wealth. Champagne flowed freely from an endless supply. Servers in black and white uniforms circulated with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres prepared by a celebrity chef who had been flown in specifically for the occasion. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Toasts were raised again and again. Everything about the evening screamed success and power, and the kind of life that most people could only dream about. The Whitmore estate had never looked more beautiful, and it had never held a darker secret. At the center of it all stood Victor Whitmore himself. At 45 years old, Victor possessed the kind of handsome that came with money and personal trainers and the best dermatologist money could buy. Silver threaded through his dark hair in a way that suggested distinguished rather than aging. A touch of gray at the temples that made him look wise and experienced rather than old. His jaw was strong, his posture perfect, his presence commanding without apparent effort. His smile was practiced and perfect, the kind of smile that had closed 1,000 business deals and hidden 1,000 lies. It was the smile of a man who had learned early that the right expression could open any door. That charm was simply another tool to be wielded in the pursuit of power. He raised his champagne glass, and the room fell silent in anticipation. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward him with the kind of attention that Victor had grown accustomed to receiving. To another year of success, Victor announced, his voice carrying easily through the grand hall with practiced projection, surrounded by the people who matter most. Applause rippled through the crowd like a wave. Glasses clinked in a symphony of crystal. Guests surged forward to offer their congratulations, their praise, their assurances of continued loyalty and partnership. But notice what Victor said. He said, people who matter most. Not people I love, not friends and family, not the people who are dear to me. Victor Whitmore chose his words very carefully, with the precision of a lawyer drafting a contract. He always did. And those who knew how to listen could hear the truth hiding behind the carefully constructed facade. At his side stood not his wife, but another woman entirely. Evelyn Cross wore a red dress that clung to her figure like a second skin, a bold color choice that announced her presence to everyone in the room. Her platinum blonde hair fell in smooth waves over her shoulders, perfectly styled by professionals who had spent hours achieving that effortless look. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry expensive, her confidence absolute. She stood exactly where Isabella should have been standing, in the place of honor beside the man of the hour. Her hand rested possessively on Victor's arm, with the casual intimacy of someone who felt entitled to that position. When she laughed at his jokes, she leaned in close enough that her perfume mingled with his cologne. A guest leaned toward her companion and whispered the question that several others had been thinking all evening. Where is his wife? Is she not pregnant? Victor overheard the whispered question. His smile did not flicker for even a moment. He had been expecting this inquiry and had prepared his answer long in advance. Isabella was not feeling well, he explained smoothly, his voice carrying just the right note of husbandly concern. The pregnancy has been difficult. She is resting upstairs. The doctor insisted she avoid the noise and excitement of large gatherings. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, smooth as silk and just as slippery. He had told the same lie to at least a dozen people already that evening, and each time it came out more naturally than the last. No one questioned it. No one pressed for details. No one asked to check on her or send their regards. No one ever questioned Victor Whitmore. Here is something every woman should remember. When someone explains an absence before you even ask, they have rehearsed the lie. When the answer comes too quickly, too smoothly, too perfectly packaged with just the right amount of concern, that is not reassurance. That is preparation. Pay attention to the explanations that come too easily. They are often the ones hiding the hardest truths. Evelyn Cross had been Victor's mistress for 6 years. 6 years of secret meetings and expensive gifts and promises about the future. She had outlasted his first wife, a woman named Claire who had drowned under mysterious circumstances at their lake house 8 years earlier. Evelyn intended to outlast his second wife as well. She had been patient. She had been discreet. She had played the long game, waiting for the moment when Victor would finally acknowledge her publicly, when she would take her rightful place at his side. And tonight, standing beside him at his birthday celebration, while his pregnant wife was nowhere to be seen, Evelyn felt that moment had finally arrived. As the party continued in full swing, one woman watched from the edges of the room with eyes that missed nothing. Maggie Sullivan had served as head housekeeper for the Whitmore family for 15 years. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Her gray uniform was spotless and pressed. Her weathered hands carried a silver tray with the practiced ease of someone who had performed this service thousands of times before. But her eyes carried something far heavier than any tray: knowledge and grief, and the weight of secrets she had kept for far too long. Maggie had served Victor's first wife, Claire. She had been there when Claire was alive, had seen the light in that young woman's eyes slowly dim over the years of her marriage. She had prepared Claire's room for guests after the funeral, had packed away her belongings with tears streaming down her face, and she had found things. In Claire's belongings, hidden in secret places that only someone who truly knew the house would think to look. Things she had kept hidden, things she had never forgotten, things that haunted her every night when she tried to sleep. Claire lasted 4 years, Maggie thought to herself as she watched Victor accept another toast. Watched him smile, that empty smile that she had learned to recognize for what it truly was. Isabella is at 3, and I can see it starting again. The isolation, the lease, the careful preparation for something terrible. Her eyes drifted toward a corridor that led deeper into the house, toward a heavy door that led down to the basement. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Not this time, Maggie whispered under her breath, a promise to herself and to the ghost of a woman who had not lived to see justice. Not again. While the party glittered and sparkled in the grand hall above, the basement was everything the celebration was not. Concrete floors stretched into shadows that seemed to swallow the weak light. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling like the veins of some mechanical beast, occasionally dripping with condensation. A single flickering bulb provided the only illumination, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for Isabella like grasping hands hungry for warmth. The air was frigid, deliberately so. Victor had turned off the heating system in the basement before locking her inside, ensuring that the cold would add another layer of torment to her imprisonment. Isabella Whitmore sat huddled against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself in a futile attempt to conserve warmth. Her pale blue maternity dress, which had been carefully chosen for the party she was supposed to attend, was now stained with grime from the dirty floor. The delicate fabric offered no protection against the concrete's chill. Her brown hair had come loose from its careful arrangement, strands sticking to her tear-stained cheeks. At 7 months pregnant, every position was uncomfortable, but the cold concrete beneath her made everything worse. Her back ached, her legs were cramping, and the baby inside her seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly in a way that brought no comfort. Isabella pressed her hand against her belly, feeling for movement. When the baby kicked against her palm, she allowed herself a small breath of relief. Still alive, still fighting. "It is okay, little one," she whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible even in the silence of the basement. "Mommy is going to figure this out. Mommy always figures things out." She looked up at the ceiling where the music pulsed faintly through the structure of the house. She could almost make out the melody, something classical and elegant, the kind of music that Victor insisted upon for his events, because it made him seem cultured and refined. 200 people were dancing and laughing and celebrating directly above her head. 200 people who had no idea that their host had locked his pregnant wife in a freezing basement. 200 people who would toast to Victor's success and shake his hand and tell him what a wonderful party this was. The irony was not lost on Isabella. "He forgot something important, though," she murmured, a small spark of defiance flickering in her chest. She reached into the fold of her dress, into the hidden pocket she had sewn there herself weeks ago, and pulled out a small object, a USB drive, black plastic, completely ordinary looking, containing evidence she had been gathering for months. He forgot that nurses document everything. And I have been a nurse for 10 years. Before she had given up her career for Victor, before she had allowed herself to be isolated from friends and family and everything she had once known, Isabella had been a pediatric nurse. She had spent a decade caring for the most vulnerable patients, learning to observe and document and trust her instincts when something felt wrong. Those instincts had been screaming at her for months now. And unlike Victor, unlike the guests upstairs, unlike everyone else in her life, Isabella had learned to listen. The USB drive contained bank statements she had photographed late at night while Victor slept. Screenshots of suspicious emails she had forwarded to a secret account. Audio recordings of arguments and threats and admissions that Victor did not know she had captured. Financial records that showed money moving to places it should not be going. Everything she needed to expose him. Everything she needed to save herself and her baby, if she could just survive long enough to use it. 6 hours before she found herself locked in the basement, Isabella had stood at the window of her bedroom, watching gardeners prepare the estate for the party. Morning light filled the beautiful space, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden beams across antique furniture and silk curtains that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The room was beautiful. Objectively, anyone would agree that it was stunning, but to Isabella, it had become just another gilded cage, a prison decorated with expensive furnishings and designer fabrics that could not disguise the bars. Her reflection in the glass showed the exhaustion she felt deep in her bones. She was beautiful still, with warm brown hair and kind hazel eyes. But there were shadows beneath those eyes now that had not been there 3 years ago. Lines of worry around her mouth that had not existed when she had walked down the aisle believing she was marrying the love of her life. She was tired, but it was not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. This was soul-deep exhaustion, the weariness that came from constantly watching her words, monitoring her expressions, trying to predict Victor's moods and navigate his expectations. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her attention from the window. She crossed the room to check the message, her movements careful and deliberate, the way pregnant women learn to move when their center of gravity shifts. The text was from Dr. Rachel Morrison, her obstetrician. The message read simply, "Bella, I noticed some concerning things at your last appointment. The bruises on your arms. Can we talk privately? It is important." Isabella stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the reply button as her heart rate increased. Dr. Morrison had noticed. Of course she had. Doctors were trained to notice these things, just like nurses were. The bruises had been from Victor grabbing her arm during an argument 3 days earlier. Isabella had worn long sleeves to the appointment, but the examination gown had revealed what she had tried to hide. Before she could decide how to respond, the bedroom door opened. Victor entered, already dressed in a casual suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. His phone pressed to his ear. He was mid-conversation, speaking in the clipped, efficient tones he used for business matters, the voice that brooked no argument and expected immediate compliance. "No, we proceed as planned," Victor said into the phone, not acknowledging Isabella's presence, even though he had walked into her space without knocking. "The offshore accounts are already set up. The documentation needs to be complete before the end of the quarter. Just make sure everything is ready." He noticed Isabella watching him, and his voice shifted immediately, becoming smoother, warmer, the practiced tone of a loving husband. "I will call you back," he said, ending the call without waiting for a response. He slipped the phone into his pocket and crossed the room toward her, his smile automatically engaging. "Good morning, darling. How is my air?" Not "how is the baby?" Not "how are you feeling?" Not "did you sleep well?" "How is my air?" As if the child growing inside her was simply another acquisition, another asset to be managed and controlled. Isabella noticed the word choice. She'd been noticing a lot of things lately. She filed this moment away with all the others, another data point in the pattern she had been tracking for months. "Active last night," she answered carefully, keeping her voice neutral and pleasant, the way she had learned to speak to avoid triggering his temper. "I think we have a soccer player." Victor's hand went to her belly without asking permission. The gesture looked loving to anyone who might have been watching. A concerned husband checking on his pregnant wife. A tender moment between expectant parents. But Isabella saw his eyes, cold and calculating, even as his lips curved upward in that practiced smile. He was not feeling for the baby's movement out of paternal love. He was checking on his investment. "Tonight needs to be perfect," he announced, his hand still on her stomach in that possessive way that made her skin crawl. "I have arranged for the spa to come to you this afternoon. Hair, makeup, the works. I want you to look your best." "That is thoughtful," Isabella replied, because that was what he expected her to say. "For the photographs," Victor continued, "there will be professional photographers at the party. Important people will be there. I need you to make a good impression. Not, I want you to feel beautiful. Not, I hope you enjoy being pampered. I need you to make a good impression." She was a prop to him, a decoration, a symbol of his success and virility. He checked his watch, already dismissing her from his attention as if she were a task he had completed. "I have meetings until 4. Evelyn is handling the final party arrangements." Isabella's expression flickered at the mention of that name. Evelyn. She knew exactly who Evelyn was and exactly what role she played in Victor's life. She had known for over a year now, had found the evidence hidden in plain sight. "She has a gift for these things," Victor continued, as if he had not noticed his wife's reaction. Or perhaps simply did not care. "You should rest. Save your energy for tonight." He kissed her forehead in that condescending way, the way someone might kiss a child or a pet, and then he left without waiting for a response. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded final. When your partner consistently makes decisions for your own good without asking what you actually want, that is not care. That is control wearing a mask. When someone arranges your schedule without consulting you, chooses your appearance without asking your preference, dictates how you should spend your time and energy, those are not acts of love. Those are acts of ownership. Isabella had learned to recognize the mask. She just had not found a way to remove it yet. The moment Victor's car disappeared down the driveway, Isabella moved with purpose. She walked to her closet, a massive space filled with designer clothes she had never wanted and rarely wore. She navigated past racks of dresses and shelves of shoes, to the back corner where a stack of cashmere sweaters sat in neat piles. Behind those sweaters, hidden in a hat box with a false bottom that she had constructed herself, was a leather journal. Isabella retrieved the journal and carried it to the window seat where the light was good. She opened it to the first page and began to read aloud, her voice steady despite the weight of the words she had written. March 15th, Victor's second phone rang at 2 in the morning. He said it was a work emergency when I asked. The caller identification said E. He deleted the call history afterward, but forgot about the phone bill. I found the record of a 45-minute call to a number I did not recognize. When I searched the number, it came back to an Evelyn Cross. She flipped through the pages, past entry after entry, written in her careful handwriting. April 3rd, found receipts in Victor's jacket pocket for jewelry I never received. A ruby necklace from Cartier, $18,000. Evelyn wore a ruby necklace at the charity gala last week. When I complimented it, she said it was a gift from an admirer. She looked directly at Victor when she said it. More pages, more evidence, more proof of the life Victor had been living behind her back. May 22nd. Victor mentioned the situation with Claire to his lawyer when he thought I was sleeping. They were in his study with the door open. He said it was handled before and it can be handled again. The lawyer said to be careful and Victor laughed. He said no one questioned it the first time. Claire was his first wife. She drowned alone at their lake house. The case was closed as an accident. Isabella closed the journal. Her hands were steady now, strengthened by purpose rather than weakened by fear. I am not crazy, she said to herself, words she had needed to repeat many times over the past months when Victor's gaslighting made her question her own perceptions. I am not paranoid, and I am not Claire. She pulled out her laptop and began transferring files to the USB drive. Bank statements she had photographed late at night while Victor snored beside her. Screenshots of emails she had accessed when he forgot to log out of his computer. Audio recordings from arguments where he had threatened her, made using the voice memo app on her phone hidden in her pocket. For 6 months, Isabella had been building a case, not for divorce, because she had learned enough about Victor to know that a simple divorce would not protect her. She was building a case for survival. She had seen what happened to women who confronted powerful men unprepared. She had read about Claire's accidental drowning and wondered how many other accidents Victor had arranged. If you are ever in a situation where you feel unsafe, documentation is your lifeline. Dates, times, details, evidence. Not because you are paranoid, but because you are smart. Not because you are overreacting, but because you are preparing. Isabella's journal was not weakness. It was not obsession. It was her weapon. And someday, she would use it. At 3 in the afternoon, Isabella walked through the estate observing the party preparations. She had declined the spa services Victor had arranged, claiming fatigue from the pregnancy. In truth, she wanted to see what was happening in her own home without Victor's supervision. Florists arranged massive centerpieces on every available surface, towers of white roses and cascading orchids that must have cost a fortune. Caterers set up stations with silver chafing dishes, their white uniforms crisp and professional. Musicians tuned their instruments in the corner of the grand ballroom, testing acoustics and adjusting microphone levels. The house was being transformed into a stage for Victor's celebration of himself. Isabella paused at a delivery that had just arrived, carried in by a young man in a courier uniform. A dress bag with a clear plastic cover, the kind used for expensive garments that required careful handling. Inside hung a stunning red gown, crimson silk that caught the light like liquid fire. Custom made, clearly designer, with a plunging neckline and a silhouette that would cling to every curve. Size 4. Definitely not a maternity size. Isabella's blood ran cold. Her hand trembled slightly as she checked the tag attached to the hanger. For EC tonight. Signed V, EC, Evelyn Cross. Victor had ordered a dress for his mistress to wear to his birthday party, in his home. While his pregnant wife was expected to smile and pretend everything was fine. Isabella's hand trembled, but her voice stayed controlled when she stopped a passing maid, a young woman who looked nervous to be addressed directly by the lady of the house. "Excuse me, do you know where this dress is supposed to go?" The maid's eyes darted away, clearly uncomfortable with the question. To the East Guest Suite, ma'am, Mr. Whitmore's orders." She paused, then added in a smaller voice, "I am sorry, ma'am, the East Guest Suite, the room directly across from the master bedroom." Isabella nodded calmly, her expression revealing nothing of the storm raging inside her. "Thank you." She turned and walked away with measured steps, maintaining her composure until she was safely back in her room with the door closed behind her. Then she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had discovered. Most women in this moment would feel only hurt. The pain of betrayal, the sting of being replaced. Isabella felt that too, a deep ache in her chest that made it hard to breathe. But she also felt something else. Clarity. Victor was not even trying to hide it anymore. He was flaunting his affair openly, bringing his mistress into their home on a night when Isabella was expected to play the role of devoted wife. He had ordered Evelyn a dress and arranged for her to stay in a guest room across the hall from their bedroom, which meant he no longer felt the need to be careful, which meant he believed Isabella was too beaten down, too isolated, too powerless to do anything about it. He was wrong. Isabella returned to her journal and added one more entry, her handwriting steady despite the emotions churning inside her. June 15th, he ordered a dress for his mistress to wear to his birthday party. In his home. While his pregnant wife watches, he is not even hiding it anymore, which means he does not think he needs to. He believes I am completely under his control. He is about to discover how wrong he is. She underlined the last sentence twice, pressing hard enough that the pen nearly tore through the paper. At 5:30 that evening, Victor returned home to dress for the party. He entered the master bedroom with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed, including the woman waiting for him inside. Isabella was sitting on the edge of the bed, her posture straight despite her exhaustion. The red dress bag lay across the mattress between them like an accusation, like a line drawn in silk and plastic. Victor saw it. His expression did not change for even a moment, betraying neither guilt nor concern. He simply nodded as if encountering an expected piece of mail. "Ah, that arrived. It is for Evelyn," Isabella said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the careful pleasantness she usually maintained. She was done pretending. "She is helping host," Victor replied smoothly, crossing to his closet to select his evening attire. "She needs to look appropriate. And where will she be standing during your toast?" Isabella pressed, rising from the bed to face him. "Beside you? In the position that should belong to your wife?" Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and hard beneath, before he recovered his composure. "Isabella, we have discussed this," he spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "The pregnancy has made you emotional, irrational. I have been patient with your moods, but you need to understand." "Patient?" Isabella interrupted, her voice rising despite her intention to stay calm. "You have been having an affair for years. You have been isolating me from everyone I know. You have been controlling every aspect of my life. And you call that patience?" "Lower your voice," Victor commanded, his tone turning to ice. "No." Isabella stood her ground, something she had not done in months. "No, I am done lowering my voice. I am done pretending not to see what is right in front of me. And I am done being the woman you keep hidden away while you parade your mistress through my home." Silence filled the room like a held breath. When Victor spoke again, the charming businessman was gone entirely. What remained was something colder, something more honest, something that Isabella had always sensed lurking beneath the surface but had never seen so clearly until this moment. "You think you have a choice here?" Victor asked, taking a step toward her. "You think you have anywhere to go? You have no family, no money of your own, no friends left who would take your call, no one who would believe you over me. I have documentation, Victor, Isabella shot back, drawing courage from the USB drive hidden in her clothing. Every lie, every transaction, every late-night phone call, I have records of the offshore accounts. I have copies of the emails to your business partners about the deals that were not quite legal. She paused, watching fear flicker across his face for the first time. And Claire's death? I found interesting things when I started looking. Very interesting things about an accidental drowning that a detective never quite believed. His name is Marcus Cole, by the way. I found his contact information. He seemed very interested when I called. The fear on Victor's face transformed into cold calculation. The wheels were turning behind his eyes, reassessing the situation, adjusting his strategy. "We will discuss this after the party," he said, his voice too calm, too controlled. "No, we will discuss this now, or I walk into that ballroom and tell every single one of your precious guests exactly who they are toasting. I will tell them about Evelyn. I will tell them about the financial fraud. I will tell them about Claire." Victor smiled, and somehow that smile was more terrifying than his anger had been. It was the smile of a predator who had just identified his prey's fatal weakness. "You are not going to the party, Isabella." His hand shot out with the speed of a striking snake and grabbed her arm. The grip was iron, hard enough to bruise, exactly like the bruises Dr. Morrison had noticed at her last appointment. "Let go of me," Isabella demanded, trying to pull away. "I said you are not going." He began dragging her toward the door. Isabella struggled against his grip, but her pregnant body could not match his strength. Every instinct screamed at her to fight back, but he was stronger and faster, and he had the element of surprise. "Victor, please," she gasped as he pulled her down the hallway. "The baby. You are hurting me. The baby is fine." Victor's voice was cold as winter. "The baby is the only reason I have kept you around this long. Did you really think I married you for love? Did you really think I wanted a mousy little nurse as my wife? You were convenient, Isabella. You were controllable. You had no family to ask questions and no money to fight back." They moved through servant quarters, away from the party preparations, away from the caterers and florists and musicians who might have seen them and asked questions. The air grew cooler with each step, dimmer. The sounds of activity faded behind them. They reached a heavy metal door at the end of a corridor that Isabella had never explored. Victor produced a key from his pocket and opened it with practiced efficiency. Cold air rushed out from the darkness beyond, carrying the smell of concrete and neglect. A single dim bulb flickered somewhere inside, barely illuminating a steep flight of stairs leading down. "You wanted time to think about our marriage?" Victor said, his grip still tight on her arm. "Here is your time. Consider it a gift." He shoved her through the doorway. Isabella stumbled forward, catching herself against a concrete pillar to keep from falling. Her free hand went instinctively to protect her belly, cushioning herself against the rough surface. "Victor," Isabella gasped, turning back toward him. His silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the quarter lights. "I am pregnant. You cannot leave me here." "When the party is over, we will talk about the future," Victor said, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who was absolutely certain of his own power. "Your future specifically, and you will learn that threatening me was the worst mistake you ever made." Claire learned that lesson too eventually. "Victor, I am 7 months pregnant. If something happens to me—" "Nothing is going to happen to you," he interrupted. "At least nothing that I do not decide should happen. You are going to stay down here and think about your choices. And when I come back, you are going to tell me exactly where that documentation is. Every copy, every backup, everything." The door slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot. The lock clicked into place with terrible finality. Darkness, silence, cold. Isabella stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. Then the reality crashed over her like a wave of ice water, and she threw herself at the door. She pounded on the metal with her fists, ignoring the pain as her knuckles struck the unforgiving surface. She screamed Victor's name until her throat was raw. She begged, she pleaded, she promised to do whatever he wanted, nothing. The only response was the faint sound of his footsteps retreating down the corridor. And then, filtering down from above like a cruel joke, the first strains of music as the string quartet began to play. The party had started. 200 people were arriving at the Whitmore estate to celebrate the man who had just locked his pregnant wife in a freezing basement. 200 people who would shake his hand and toast his success and have no idea that beneath their feet, a woman and her unborn child were fighting for survival. Isabella sank to the cold concrete floor, her back against the door, her hands wrapped protectively around her belly. In that moment, something broke and so it took her, not her spirit, not yet, but her illusion. The last shred of hope that maybe she had been wrong about Victor. Maybe he was not as bad as she feared. Maybe he could change. Maybe there was still some part of the man she had married who was capable of love. That illusion shattered like glass hitting stone. She was not wrong about him. She had never been wrong. And now she was trapped in the basement of her own home, pregnant and alone, with a man who had already killed one wife and clearly had no intention of letting the second one escape. The hours passed slowly in the basement. Isabella had no way to mark time except by the changes in the music filtering down from above and the gradual deepening of her fear. The party grew louder as the night progressed. She could hear the bass notes of the music pulsing through the structure of the house, could occasionally make out bursts of laughter that seemed to mock her situation. At one point, she heard what sounded like a speech, followed by applause. Victor accepting his birthday toast while she shivered in the dark. Isabella used her nursing knowledge to monitor herself and her baby, falling back on her training when everything else felt out of control. She counted fetal movements, timing them against her pulse. She watched for signs of hypothermia as the cold seeped deeper into her bones, noting the progression from shivering to numbness to the dangerous stillness that came before the body started to shut down. And she talked to her child because the sound of her own voice was the only warmth she had left. "Your father thinks I am helpless," she whispered, her hand pressed against her belly. "He thinks he has broken me. He thinks there is nothing I can do." The baby kicked against her palm as if in response. "But Mommy has a plan. Mommy always has a plan. And Mommy has something your father does not know about." She felt for the USB drive still hidden in the fold of her dress. It was still there, a small hard shape against her thigh. Her evidence, her weapon. If she could just survive long enough to use it. A contraction rippled through her abdomen, startling her with its intensity. Not a Braxton Hicks practice contraction, which she had been experiencing for weeks. This was something more real, more urgent. "Not now," Isabella breathed, pressing her hands against her stomach as if she could physically hold back the labor. Please not now. She was only 7 months along. Too early, much too early. Babies born this premature could survive, but only with immediate medical intervention. Only with a neonatal intensive care unit and specialists and equipment that certainly did not exist in a cold, dark basement. The stress, the cold, the fear. It was all taking its toll on her body in ways she could not control. Isabella closed her eyes and focused on breathing, in through her nose, out through her mouth, the way her training had taught her, the way she had taught countless patients during her years as a nurse. She would survive this. She had to survive this. Her baby was counting on her. And somewhere out there, she had to believe that someone was coming. While Isabella shivered in the basement and prayed for rescue, Maggie Sullivan moved through the party above like a ghost. Servants learned to be invisible. It was one of the first lessons Maggie had absorbed when she began working in service at the age of 22. You saw everything but noticed nothing. You heard every conversation but repeated none of it. You existed in the spaces between the wealthy and powerful, close enough to serve but distant enough to be forgotten. Maggie had perfected that invisibility over 15 years. She carried silver trays and refreshed champagne glasses and spoke only when spoken to. She anticipated needs before they were expressed and disappeared before thanks could be offered. But her eyes missed nothing. She watched Victor work the room, moving from group to group with practiced charm. His smile never wavered. His handshake was always firm. His anecdotes were always perfectly timed. He accepted compliment after compliment, toast after toast, the adulation of people who saw only what he wanted them to see. She watched Evelyn cling to his arm like a trophy she had won, her red dress catching the light every time she moved. Evelyn laughed too loud at Victor's jokes, touched him too intimately for polite company, made sure everyone in the room understood exactly what her position was in his life. She watched the guests drink and dance and celebrate, oblivious to the horror unfolding beneath her feet. 300 people in evening wear, enjoying the champagne and the caviar and the music, while a pregnant woman sat alone in a freezing basement, wondering if she would survive the night. Maggie had worked for the Whitmore family since before Victor married Claire. She had been here when Claire was alive, had watched that young woman arrive at the estate full of hope and love and dreams for the future. She had seen the light in Claire's eyes slowly dimming over the years of her marriage, watched her become more isolated, more fearful, more like a ghost haunting her own home. She had tried to help, in small ways, in careful ways, in ways that would not draw Victor's attention or his wrath. She had left encouraging notes where Claire would find them. She had listened when Claire needed to talk. She had pretended not to notice when Claire began hiding documents and recording conversations. And then Claire had drowned. Officially, it was an accident, a tragic slip at the lake house where she had gone alone to clear her head. Victor had been in the city that weekend, had an airtight alibi with dozens of witnesses. He had been devastated by the news, or so he claimed. The investigation was brief, the conclusion predetermined, the case closed within weeks. But Maggie knew better. She had found Claire's hidden journal after the funeral, tucked behind a loose panel in the closet that Claire had shown her months earlier. She had read the entries documenting Victor's abuse, his threats, his financial crimes, his cold calculation. She had seen the photographs of bruises Claire had taken as evidence, purple and yellow marks on her arms and ribs and back that she had hidden beneath the designer clothes. She had found recordings too, audio files on a small device that Claire had used to capture Victor's voice threatening her, describing in chilling detail what would happen if she ever tried to leave or expose him. And Maggie had kept everything, hidden it in a fireproof box behind a loose stone in the wine cellar that Victor never visited, waiting, watching, hoping that someday she would find someone who could help her bring Victor to justice. That someone had appeared 6 months ago. Theodore Hartwell had contacted her through a private investigator, a quiet inquiry about employment at the Whitmore estate. At first, Maggie had been suspicious. Wealthy men did not typically reach out to household staff through intermediaries. But then Theodore had explained why he was interested in the Whitmore family, why he had been investigating Victor for months, why he needed someone on the inside who could tell him what was really happening behind closed doors. Isabella Whitmore was his daughter, his biological daughter, given up for adoption 32 years ago when he was 18 years old, poor, scared, and too young to understand what he was giving away. He had spent decades searching for her, had finally tracked her down only to discover that she had married a monster. Maggie had wept when Theodore told her the story. Then she had dried her tears and agreed to help. For 6 months, she had been sending updates, documenting Isabella's isolation, recording Victor's behavior, watching for signs that the pattern was repeating, that Victor was preparing to do to Isabella what he had done to Claire. Tonight, those signs were impossible to miss. Maggie approached the corridor leading to the basement. She had seen Victor take Isabella that direction hours earlier, had watched them disappear into the service areas where guests were not meant to go. She had waited for Isabella to return. She was still waiting. A security guard blocked her path before she could reach the basement door. He was one of Victor's private hires, a large man with cold eyes and an earpiece that connected him to the rest of the security team. "Sorry, Maggie." The guard did not sound sorry at all. "Mr. Whitmore's orders. This area is restricted tonight." "I need to check the wine storage," Maggie tried, keeping her voice calm and professional. "We are running low on the reserve champagne." I said restricted. She retreated without argument, because arguing would draw attention. But her mind was already working, already planning, already calculating the fastest route to the basement using passages that Victor's security team did not know existed. In the service kitchen, away from the bustle of the catering staff, Maggie pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact saved under the initials T.H. Private. She typed a message quickly, her fingers trembling with urgency. "It is happening. Same pattern as Claire. Same isolation. She has been missing since before the party started. I cannot confirm location, but I suspect the basement." He took her that direction, and she never came back. "Please advise." She hit send and waited, her heart pounding against her ribs. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then 3 dots appeared on the screen, indicating that someone was typing a response. The reply came through, Do not intervene yet. My team is en route. Estimated arrival 2 hours. Keep documenting. If she is in immediate danger, make the call. Maggie read the message twice, her stomach sinking. 2 hours. Theodore's team was 2 hours away. She thought about Isabella in the basement. She thought about Claire in the lake. She thought about all the things she should have done 8 years ago and all the regrets she would carry for the rest of her life. 2 hours might be too long, she whispered to herself. She pocketed the phone and returned to the party. But now she moved differently. Her invisible servant's shuffle became something more purposeful, more watchful. She was not just observing anymore. She was preparing. Sometimes help is coming, but it is not coming fast enough. Sometimes you have to make your own choice, your own decision to act even when you are afraid. Maggie had spent 8 years regretting that she did not act sooner to help Claire. She had told herself that there was nothing she could have done, that Victor was too powerful, that speaking up would have only put her own life at risk. But the truth was simpler and harder. She had been afraid, and her fear had cost Claire her life. She was not going to make that mistake twice. At 11:30, the party began to thin. Guests departed in elegant waves, their luxury cars pulling away from the estate one by one. The string quartet played their final set. The champagne bottles ran empty. The celebration wound down with the slow inevitability of all parties. Victor stood at the entrance accepting praise and shaking hands, playing the gracious host until the very end. Evelyn clung to his arm, drunk on champagne and her own perceived victory. They looked like a couple, Maggie thought. They looked like they belonged together. Maybe they did. Two predators circling each other, each one believing they were in control. When the last important guest had departed, when the caterers began packing up and the musicians carried out their instruments, Maggie made her move. "Cover for me," she told a younger maid, a girl who had only been working at the estate for a few months and still believed that the Whitmores were a normal, wealthy family. "I need to check something." She slipped away through a service corridor, moving quickly and quietly through passages built for servants to travel unseen. The house was a maze of secret routes and hidden doorways, designed in an era when the help was expected to be invisible. Maggie knew every passage. She had walked them thousands of times over 15 years. She knew which floorboards creaked and which doors squeaked and which routes would take her where she needed to go without being seen. Her master key ring hung heavy in her pocket. The basement key was supposed to be restricted, held only by Victor and his most trusted security personnel. But Maggie had been here longer than any of them, and she had made copies of keys that Victor did not know existed. She reached the basement door and paused. The guard had moved on, probably called away to help with the end of party logistics. The corridor was empty. "Claire," she whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for her keys. "Forgive me for not acting sooner. Isabella, please be alive." She pressed her ear against the cold metal door. At first, she heard nothing but silence. Her heart sank. Then, so faint she almost missed it, a sound. Tapping, weak but rhythmic. ... Dash, dash, dash. ... SOS. Maggie's heart seized. Someone was alive in there. Someone was trying to signal for help. She fumbled for her keys, found the right one, and jammed it into the lock. The mechanism turned with a click that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet corridor. She pushed the door open. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of concrete and fear and something else. Something that smelled like desperation. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting uneven light across the basement. And there on the floor, pale and shaking and barely conscious, was Isabella. One hand was still pressed against a pipe she had been using to tap out her distress signal. The other cradled her pregnant belly in a protective gesture that made Maggie's heart break. Their eyes met. "Oh, Isabella," Maggie breathed, rushing down the stairs toward her. Isabella's voice came out cracked and broken, the voice of someone who had been screaming for hours until nothing remained but a whisper. "Maggie, the baby, I think something is wrong." Maggie helped Isabella to her feet, supporting most of the younger woman's weight as they struggled to stand. Isabella could barely keep herself upright, her legs weak from hours on the cold concrete floor, her body shivering uncontrollably despite her efforts to stay calm. "Can you walk?" Maggie asked urgently, her arm wrapped around Isabella's waist. "I have to," Isabella replied through chattering teeth. "We have to get out before Victor finds out." Before she stopped mid-sentence, her hand flying to her stomach as pain crossed her face. A gasp escaped her lips. Contractions, she managed. They started about an hour ago, mild at first, but they are getting stronger. Maggie, I am only 7 months. It is too early. Maggie's face paled, but she kept her voice steady. The calm of experience, the composure that came from decades of handling household crises, both large and small. We are getting you to a hospital, she said firmly. Right now, I have my car in the service lot. Can you make it that far? I do not have a choice. They moved slowly through the basement and up the stairs, Isabella leaning heavily on Maggie for support. Every step was an effort. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain and fear through Isabella's exhausted body. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying. He killed her, did he not? Isabella asked as they walked, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire, everyone said it was an accident, but Victor told me tonight. He admitted it. Maggie's grip on Isabella tightened. I know, she said quietly. I have known for 8 years. I found her journal after the funeral. Her evidence. Everything she was collecting against him. You knew? Isabella stopped walking, staring at Maggie with something between shock and betrayal. You knew what he was and you stayed? I stayed because I was waiting for a chance to bring him down. Maggie's voice cracked with emotion. I was afraid to act alone, afraid of what he would do. And then you came along and I saw him starting the same pattern all over again. The isolation, the control, the preparation. Tears streamed down her weathered face. I have been trying to help you, she continued. I have been sending information to someone who wants to stop Victor as much as I do. Someone who has the resources to actually fight him. Who? There is no time to explain now. Let us get you safe first. Then I will tell you everything. They continued moving through the corridor, past the wine cellar and the storage rooms and the mechanical spaces that kept the massive estate running. Maggie navigated by memory, choosing routes that avoided the remaining staff and the security cameras that Victor had installed throughout the house. They reached a service exit at the back of the estate. Maggie pushed open the door and cool night air flooded in, fresh and clean and sweet with the smell of grass and flowers. Isabella nearly wept at the sensation. After hours in the cold, dark basement, the outside air felt like freedom. We made it, she breathed, tears streaming down her face. Maggie, we actually made it. She could see Maggie's car parked in the service lot, a modest sedan that looked like salvation on 4 wheels. The main gate was visible in the distance. The road beyond that led to the hospital, to safety, to a chance at survival. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Is this not touching? Evelyn Cross stood blocking the path between them and the car. She was still wearing the red dress she had worn to the party, though she had removed her heels and now stood barefoot on the flagstone path. Her phone was in her hand, already recording. The pregnant wife sneaking out with the help, Evelyn continued, her voice dripping with amusement. What will people think? What will Victor think when I show him this video? Get out of my way, Evelyn, Isabella demanded, summoning strength she did not know she still possessed. Or what? Evelyn laughed, a cruel sound that echoed across the empty grounds. You will waddle at me? You can barely stand up straight. She stepped closer, fully blocking the exit. Victor told me what you threatened him with, Evelyn continued. Documentation, evidence, recordings. He told me you called that detective who was suspicious about Claire. She smiled, and the smile was almost as cold as Victor's. I helped him deal with Claire, you know. I was there that weekend at the lake house. I watched him hold her under the water while she struggled. And I will tell you what I told her before she died. Evelyn leaned close enough that Isabella could smell the champagne on her breath. No one is coming for you. No one cares about you. And no one will ever believe you over Victor. Then she raised her voice, shouting across the grounds. Victor, I found something interesting. Her shout carried across the grounds, cutting through the quiet of the late hour. Within minutes, Victor appeared. He was still in his party clothes, his expression cold and furious. Behind him came security guards and Dr. Richard Harrison, summoned from wherever he had been waiting. The hope that had bloomed in Isabella's chest withered and died. Victor looked at Maggie with eyes like ice. You are fired, he said simply. Obviously, but we will discuss the rest later. Your betrayal, your involvement with Theodore Hartwell, your interference in my family matters. Maggie's face showed shock. How do you know about? I monitor all communications on my property, Victor interrupted. Every phone call, every text message, every email. Did you think I would not notice that my housekeeper was sending reports about my wife to a tech billionaire? He turned to Isabella. And you? Did you think I would not find out about your little evidence collection? The journal? The USB drive? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black object. The USB drive, Isabella's weapon, taken from her while she was unconscious in the medical suite. Your friend Maggie retrieved this while you were sleeping, Victor continued. She thought she was being clever, but I have cameras in every room of this house. I watched her take it. I let her think she had gotten away with something, and then I had security retrieve it from her room. He held up the drive, then dropped it on the ground and crushed it beneath his heel. No more documentation, he said as the plastic shattered. No more evidence. No more threats. Isabella felt her last hope crumble along with the drive. Go back inside, Victor commanded, gesturing to the security guards. Take her to the secure room in the north wing, the one with no windows. And this time, make sure no one interrupts. Isabella, Maggie cried out as guards grabbed her arms. Do not give up. Help is coming. I promise you, help is coming. Victor laughed. Help? What help? Theodore Hartwell? Your mysterious benefactor? His plane does not land for another hour. And by then this situation will be resolved. He turned to another group of guards. Take Maggie to the gatehouse. Hold her there until my lawyers arrive. We will discuss criminal trespassing charges and theft and conspiracy. As Isabella was dragged back into the house, she watched her only ally being pulled in the opposite direction. The night air disappeared. The stars vanished. Freedom slipped away like a dream upon waking. Victor stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the lights of the estate. You should not have threatened me, Isabella, he said quietly. Claire made the same mistake. And look where that got her. The door closed. And Isabella's hope shattered like glass. Isabella was brought to a private medical suite in the north wing of the mansion, a room she had never seen before in 3 years of marriage. It was equipped with hospital-grade equipment, a bed with restraints, monitoring machines, and a cabinet full of pharmaceutical supplies. Waiting inside was Dr. Richard Harrison, Victor's personal physician. He was an older man in his mid-50s with cold ease and an expensive suit and the demeanor of someone who had long ago traded his Hippocratic oath for a generous retainer. Mr. Whitmore, Harrison said smoothly as Victor pushed Isabella into the room. What seems to be the issue this time? My wife has been experiencing confusion, Victor explained, straightening his jacket and smoothing his hair as if he had not just dragged a pregnant woman through his home. The pregnancy has been difficult. She has been making accusations, having delusions. She tried to run away tonight and made all sorts of wild claims about evidence and documentation. I am not having delusions, Isabella shouted, fighting against the grip of the security guards. He locked me in the basement for 6 hours. He admitted to killing his first wife. Dr. Harrison did not even glance in her direction. His attention remained fixed on Victor as if Isabella had not spoken at all. Prenatal psychosis he diagnosed without examination. Not uncommon in high-risk pregnancies. The hormonal changes can cause severe breaks with reality. I can prescribe something to keep her calm. I am a nurse, Isabella insisted, her voice rising with desperation. I trained at Johns Hopkins. I worked in pediatrics for 10 years. I know exactly what you are trying to do. You are trying to sedate me so Victor can. She was a nurse, Victor corrected smoothly. Before the pregnancy affected her judgment. Before the stress became too much for her fragile mental state. Dr. Harrison nodded sympathetically as he began preparing a syringe. He moved with practiced efficiency, selecting a vial from the cabinet and measuring out a precise dose. Do not touch me, Isabella warned, backing away as far as the guards holding her would allow. Do not you dare inject me with that. Hold her. Victor commanded, boss. The security guards tightened their grip, pinning her arms to her sides. Isabella struggled, but she was exhausted from hours in the basement, weakened by the cold and the stress and the early contractions that were still rippling through her abdomen at irregular intervals. This is assault, she shouted, knowing that no one who could help her would hear. This is medical assault. When people find out what you have done. Victor leaned close, his face inches from hers, his voice dropping to a whisper that the guards and the doctor could not hear. Who is going to tell them, Isabella? Your parents? Dead. Your friends? You have not spoken to them in years because I made sure of that. Your co-workers? You quit your job because I convinced you it was the right thing to do. There is no one left who cares about you. There is no one coming to save you. There never was. The needle approached, glinting in the bright medical lights. Victor's words were designed to break her. There is no one coming. It is what every abuser wants their victim to believe. It is the final weapon in their arsenal, the lie that keeps women trapped in impossible situations, the darkness that makes escape seem impossible. But Isabella had something Victor did not know about. She had spent months building connections, planting seeds, preparing for the possibility that someday she might need help. She had called Detective Marcus Cole and told him about her suspicions regarding Claire. She had left copies of her evidence in places Victor had not thought to look. She had written letters to friends she had not spoken to in years, letters that would be mailed automatically if she failed to check in for more than 48 hours. And somewhere out there, a plane was landing. A team was mobilizing. Help was coming. She just had to survive long enough for it to arrive. Isabella looked at the needle, at Victor's triumphant face, at the guards holding her down and the doctor who had sold his soul for money. She made a decision. She went limp. Stop fighting. Let her body sag against the guards as if all the resistance had drained out of her at once. Please, she whispered, letting tears fall freely. Please do not hurt my baby. I will do whatever you want. I will not fight anymore. Just please do not hurt my baby. Victor smiled, satisfied by her apparent surrender. He nodded to the doctor. Just a mild sedative, Dr. Harrison announced, swabbing her arm with alcohol. She will sleep until morning. By then her episode will have passed and we can reassess her mental state. The needle pierced her arm. Cold spread through her veins. Isabella's eyes fluttered closed. But not before she saw Maggie being held in the doorway, watching with horror, and not before she murmured words that only she could hear. Help is coming, help is coming, help is coming. Then darkness claimed her. While Isabella slept her drugged sleep, a private plane descended toward the regional airport 40 miles from the Whitmore estate. Inside sat Theodore Hartwell, 68 years old with silver hair, and the kind of powerful presence that did not need to announce itself. He wore a simple charcoal suit, no tie, his face set in lines of determination and barely controlled fear. He was on the phone, his voice tight with urgency. I want the legal team ready to move at dawn, he commanded, speaking to one of his senior attorneys. Full forensic accounting on Whitmore's finances. I want every offshore account traced, every suspicious transaction documented, every violation of securities law identified. He paused, listening, and get me Detective Marcus Cole. He investigated Claire Whitmore's death 8 years ago. Tell him the case is being reopened. Tell him we have new evidence. Tell him that everything he suspected about Victor Whitmore was true. He ended the call and looked at a photograph in his hand. Isabella, his daughter, the child he had given up 32 years ago when he was 18 years old, poor, scared, and too young to understand the magnitude of his mistake. He remembered the day he had signed the adoption papers. His girlfriend had just given birth. He had held the baby for exactly 3 hours, marveling at her perfect fingers and her tiny nose and her eyes that looked exactly like his own. And then the social worker had come, and he had let them take her away, convinced that he was giving her a better life, that a baby deserved more than a teenage father with no money and no prospects and no idea how to be a parent. He had regretted it every day since. I gave you up because I was poor and stupid and scared, Theodore murmured to the photograph. I have spent 30 years becoming rich enough to find you, building an empire so I would have the resources to search, hiring investigators who could track down adoption records that were supposed to be sealed. His voice cracked. And I am not losing you now, not to Victor Whitmore, not to anyone. His phone buzzed with a message from Maggie Sullivan. She had been separated from her phone but had managed to send one final text before the guards confiscated it. She has been sedated. They are calling it medical treatment. The situation is escalating. Victor knows about you. Theodore's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He leaned toward the pilot. How much faster can we go? While Theodore's plane raced through the night sky toward the regional airport, Maggie Sullivan sat in the gatehouse under guard, her wrists zip-tied to a chair. But Maggie was not defeated. Maggie had spent 15 years learning the secrets of the Whitmore estate, and she had prepared for this moment more thoroughly than Victor could possibly imagine. The guards who had been assigned to watch her were young and inexperienced, hired for their muscles rather than their intelligence. They sat across the room playing cards on their phones, confident that a 58-year-old housekeeper posed no threat. They did not know about the knife she kept strapped to her ankle, hidden beneath her practical servant's shoes. They did not know about the lockpick set sewn into the lining of her apron, and they most certainly did not know about the second set of evidence she had hidden, the copies she had made of Claire's journal and recordings, stored in a safe deposit box at a bank in town under a false name. The USB drive Victor had destroyed contained only copies. The originals were safe. Maggie waited until both guards were absorbed in their phones. Then she began working on the zip ties. It took her nearly 20 minutes of patient sawing with the tiny blade from her ankle holster, but eventually the plastic gave way. She was free. Now came the harder part. She needed to get out of the gatehouse, avoid detection, and make contact with Theodore Hartwell's team before Victor could do any more damage to Isabella. She moved to the window and assessed her options. The gatehouse was at the edge of the property, near the main road. If she could get over the wall, she could flag down a passing car or make her way to the nearest house to call for help. But the wall was 12 feet high and topped with security cameras. Victor would know the moment she tried to escape, unless she created a distraction first. Maggie looked at the electrical panel on the wall of the gatehouse. She knew the estate systems intimately. She knew that the gatehouse controlled the security feeds for the entire perimeter. And she knew that if something happened to disrupt those systems, chaos would follow. She found what she was looking for, a circuit breaker that controlled the exterior cameras. And next to it, the main power switch for the gatehouse itself. Maggie took a deep breath and pulled both switches at once. The gatehouse plunged into darkness. Outside, the security lights along the perimeter wall flickered and died. In the confusion that followed, Maggie slipped out a side door and disappeared into the night. 3 miles away, a convoy of black SUVs turned onto the road that led to the Whitmore estate. Theodore Hartwell rode in the lead vehicle, his jaw set with determination. He had landed at the regional airport 20 minutes earlier, where a team of private security contractors and legal specialists had been waiting with vehicles and equipment. Beside him sat Detective Marcus Cole, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much darkness in his career. Cole had spent 8 years haunted by Claire Whitmore's death, knowing in his gut that Victor was responsible, but unable to prove it. Tonight, that was going to change. The evidence Maggie sent is enough for a warrant, Cole said, reviewing documents on his tablet. Claire's journal, the photographs of her injuries, the recordings of Victor threatening her, plus the financial fraud she documented. This is solid. But will it be enough, Theodore asked. Victor has lawyers, resources. He has spent years covering his tracks. It is enough to arrest him, Cole confirmed. It is enough to hold him while we investigate further. And once we have him in custody, once his employees realize he cannot protect them anymore, others will come forward. They always do. Theodore nodded, but his mind was on Isabella, on his daughter trapped in that house with a man who had already killed one wife. What about Isabella? Theodore pressed. We need to get her out first, before Victor can. He could not finish the sentence. Cole understood. We go in hard and fast, the detective said. My team takes Victor into custody. Your people extract Isabella. We meet in the middle and sort out the paperwork later. And if Victor resists, Cole's expression was grim, then we handle it, Owen. The convoy accelerated into the darkness, lights off, moving like shadows toward the Whitmore estate. At the main gate, they found an unexpected ally. Maggie Sullivan stood in the middle of the road, waving her arms to flag them down. Her servant's uniform was torn and dirty, her silver-streaked hair had come loose from its bun, and there was a fierce determination in her eyes that made her look younger than her years. Mr. Hartwell, she said as Theodore's window rolled down. She is in the north wing, second floor, end of the hall. They sedated her and locked her in. How long ago? Theodore demanded. About 2 hours. She was having contractions before they drugged her. The baby might be coming. Theodore turned to Cole. We need to move. Now, the convoy surged forward, crashing through the estate gates without slowing down. Inside the Whitmore mansion, alarms began to blare. Victor Whitmore was in his study reviewing damage control strategies when the alarms went off. He had been pleased with how the evening had concluded. Isabella was secured and sedated. Maggie was contained. The evidence was destroyed. By morning, he would have lawyers in place to discredit any accusations Isabella might try to make. The story would be simple. His pregnant wife had suffered a mental breakdown. She had become delusional, paranoid, convinced that her loving husband was somehow responsible for his first wife's tragic accident. It would be her word against his. And Victor Whitmore's word carried a great deal of weight. But then the alarms started screaming, and his security team began reporting intruders on the grounds. Multiple vehicles, his head of security reported via radio. Professional team, they have already breached the main gate. Victor's blood ran cold. Theodore Hartwell, it had to be. He had underestimated the old man. He had assumed that Hartwell would work through legal channels, that there would be time to prepare, to spin the narrative, to disappear any inconvenient evidence. He had been wrong. Victor grabbed his phone and started making calls. Lawyers, connections in law enforcement, people who owed him favors. But no one answered. No one returned his messages. The network of influence he had spent decades building seemed to have vanished overnight. Mr. Whitmore, his security chief reported, they have a detective with them. They are serving a warrant. A warrant? For what? For your arrest, sir. Murder, unlawful imprisonment, financial fraud. The list is extensive. Victor felt the walls closing in around him. Everything he had built, everything he had protected, everything he had killed to achieve. It was all crumbling. He needed to get to Isabella. She was the leverage. As long as he had her, as long as he had the baby, he had something to bargain with. He ran. Theodore Hartwell led the charge to the north wing, flanked by his security team and Detective Cole. They moved through the mansion with purpose, following the directions Maggie had provided. Servants fled at their approach. Security guards who tried to intervene were quickly neutralized, detained with zip ties and left for the police who were en route. The locked bedroom at the end of the hall was exactly where Maggie had said it would be. A heavy wooden door with a modern electronic lock. "Open it!" Theodore commanded. A specialist on his team produced tools and went to work. Within 30 seconds, the lock clicked open. Theodore pushed through the door and saw his daughter for the first time in 32 years. Isabella was lying on a hospital bed, pale and still, connected to monitoring equipment that beeped with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Her brown hair was spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in drugged sleep. But something else was happening too. The monitors showed contractions. Regular now. Strong. The baby was coming. Theodore crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to his knees beside the bed. He took Isabella's hand in his, marveling at how much she looked like her mother, marveling at the miracle that he was finally, after all these years, able to touch his child. "Isabella," he said, his voice breaking. "Isabella, can you hear me? I am here. I found you. I am your father." Her eyes fluttered. The sedative was wearing off. She was fighting her way back to consciousness. "I do not understand." "How understand?" she murmured, her voice thick and confused. "Father, I do not have a father. My parents died when I was 19. "Your adoptive parents," Theodore said gently. "I gave you up when you were a baby. I was young and poor and scared. I have spent my whole life regretting it. I have spent 30 years searching for you." He squeezed her hand. "But I found you, and I am not losing you now. We are getting you out of here." At that moment, Victor appeared in the doorway. He was disheveled, his suit rumpled, his carefully styled hair in disarray. But there was a gun in his hand, pointed directly at Theodore. "Step away from my wife," Victor commanded. Theodore rose slowly, putting himself between the gun and Isabella. "It is over, Whitmore," he said calmly. "The police are on their way. My team has secured the estate. Your accounts have been frozen. Your partners have been notified. Everything you have built is crumbling as we speak." Victor's hand trembled, but the gun remained raised. "You think you can just take her? Take my wife? Take my child?" "She is not your wife," Theodore replied. She is my daughter, and that child she is carrying is my grandchild, and you will never hurt either of them again. Detective Cole appeared in the doorway behind Victor, his own weapon drawn. Victor Whitmore, Cole announced. You are under arrest for the murder of Claire Whitmore. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Isabella Whitmore. You are under arrest for unlawful imprisonment, financial fraud, and approximately 37 other charges that we will enumerate in detail at the station. Victor spun toward the new threat, then back toward Theodore, then toward the door, searching desperately for an escape that did not exist. This is a mistake, he stammered. This is all a misunderstanding. I have lawyers. I have rights. You cannot just... Actually, Cole interrupted. I have a warrant, signed in by Judge Morrison 2 hours ago, based on evidence provided by Claire Whitmore herself. Your first wife documented everything, Victor. Every threat, every criminal, every detail of how you abused her, and she hid it where you would never find it. Victor's face drained of color. That is impossible. Claire's evidence was destroyed. I made sure. You destroyed what you knew about, Cole said. You did not know about the copies she gave to your housekeeper. You did not know about the recordings stored on a cloud server that only Maggie could access. He stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Claire Whitmore reached out from beyond the grave, Cole continued, and she is finally going to get justice. Victor looked around the room one last time, searching for an escape, finding none. Then he dropped the gun. The metal clattered against the floor, followed a moment later by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. It was over. The ambulance rushed toward the hospital with lights flashing and sirens wailing. Inside, Isabella lay on a stretcher, Theodore holding her hand as paramedics monitored her vital signs. The contractions were coming faster now. The baby was not waiting. I should have found you sooner, Theodore said, tears streaming down his face. I looked for 30 years, but I should have looked harder. I should have never given you up in the first place. Isabella squeezed his hand through another contraction, breathing through the pain the way her training had taught her. You are here now, she managed between breaths. That is what matters. She looked at this stranger who had her eyes, this man who had spent a fortune and moved heaven and earth to save her. I need you to know something, she said. I do not care about your money. I do not care about your empire or your influence. I do not care if you are a billionaire or a pauper. Theodore waited, afraid to breathe. I just want my child to be safe, Isabella continued. I just want to be free. I just want to start over and build a life that is mine. Theodore brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture of tenderness that said more than words could express. Your child will be safe, he promised. You will be free, and you will have every resource I can provide to build whatever life you want. No strings, no expectations. No, just a father trying to make up for 32 years of absence. Another contraction hit, stronger than the ones before. I think I need to push, Isabella gasped. The paramedics exchanged urgent glances. We are 5 minutes from the hospital, one of them said. Can you hold on? Isabella shook her head. The baby is coming now. What followed was a blur of controlled chaos. The paramedics shifted into emergency delivery mode, preparing supplies and coaching Isabella through each contraction. Theodore held her hand and whispered encouragement, telling her she was strong, telling her she was brave, telling her he was proud of her. In the back of a speeding ambulance, with sirens wailing and the world rushing past outside, Isabella Whitmore gave birth to a daughter. The baby was small but healthy, screaming her outrage at the world with impressive lung capacity. 7 months gestation, slightly premature, but strong. Isabella held her daughter for the first time, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it felt like it might crack her chest open. She is perfect, Isabella whispered. Look at her. She is perfect. Theodore looked at his granddaughter, at this tiny miracle who represented hope and healing and the possibility of redemption. She looks like you, he said, when you were born. Isabella looked up at him. You saw me when I was born? For 3 hours, the most beautiful 3 hours of my life. And then I made the worst decision I ever made. I let them take you away. You thought you were protecting me. I was wrong. They sat in silence for a moment, 3 generations bound together by blood and pain and the fragile promise of healing. What will you name her? Theodore asked finally. Isabella considered. She thought about everything she had been through. She thought about Claire, the woman who had come before her, whose evidence had ultimately saved her life. She thought about justice and redemption and the power of truth. Claire, Isabella said. I am naming her Claire. Theodore understood immediately, his eyes filled with fresh tears. Someone should remember her, Isabella explained. Someone should say her name with love instead of lies. Victor took everything from her. Her life, her reputation, her chance to tell her own story. But I can give her this. I can give her a legacy. She looked down at the baby in her arms. Welcome to the world, Claire. You are going to have a life full of love and truth and freedom. I promise. The ambulance pulled into the hospital emergency bay. Doctors and nurses rushed forward to receive them. But for one perfect moment, Isabella held her daughter close and felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. 6 months later, newspaper headlines told the rest of the story. Whitmore heir, convicted, life sentence for murder of first wife. Billionaire's daughter, Isabella Hartwell, inherits father's empire. Mistress turns state. Witness, Evelyn Cross receives 5 years. Corrupt doctor loses license. Harrison faces federal charges. The trial had been a media sensation. Victor Whitmore, once one of the most respected businessmen in the country, was exposed as a murderer and abuser. Evidence poured in from every direction. Claire's journal and recordings, financial documents showing decades of fraud, testimony from employees who had witnessed his cruelty but had been too afraid to speak. Evelyn Cross, faced with the choice between loyalty and self-preservation, had chosen herself. She testified against Victor in exchange for a reduced sentence, describing in horrifying detail how she had helped him murder Claire and cover up the crime. James Whitmore, Victor's own father, had emerged from the shadows to add his testimony. Dying of cancer and desperate to cleanse his soul, the old man confessed that he had known about Claire's murder all along. He had seen the scratches on Victor's arms. He had paid the medical examiner to falsify the autopsy report. He had spent 8 years drowning his guilt in silence. And Dr. Richard Harrison, faced with overwhelming evidence of his complicity, had tried to bargain his way out of prison by revealing Victor's most damning secret: the contingency plans, the medications he had been asked to research, the untraceable complications that Victor had planned for Isabella after the baby was born. Victor Whitmore received 3 consecutive life sentences. He would never see the outside of a prison again. Court footage showed him being led away in shackles, a broken man who had aged a decade in 6 months. The confident predator was gone, replaced by something smaller and more pathetic than anyone who had known him would have believed possible. This is not justice, Victor shouted at the cameras as guards dragged him away. This is persecution. I am the real victim here. I was framed. I was. But no one was listening anymore. 1 year after that terrible night at the Whitmore estate, Isabella sat on a blanket in a sprawling garden, watching baby Claire take her first wobbly steps across the grass. The baby was healthy now, a bright-eyed toddler with her mother's brown hair and her grandfather's determined chin. She tottered forward on chubby legs, fell onto her bottom, considered the situation for a moment, then pushed herself back up and tried again. Theodore approached with glasses of lemonade, moving slower than he used to but refusing to miss a moment of his granddaughter's life. The past year had taken a toll on him, the stress and the worry and the effort of dismantling Victor's criminal empire. But it had also given him something he had spent 30 years seeking: a family. She has your determination, Theodore observed, settling onto the blanket beside Isabella. She has your stubbornness, Isabella replied with a smile. That is the same thing. I know. They watched Claire together as the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. The garden was part of Theodore's estate, a beautiful sprawling property that he had offered to share with Isabella and her daughter, not as a prison or a gilded cage, but as a home, a real home filled with love instead of fear. I spent so long feeling alone, Isabella said quietly, thinking I had no one. I almost believed Victor when he said no one was coming for me. But someone was. But someone was. She looked at her father, at this man who had spent 3 decades searching for her, who had built an empire partly so he would have the resources to find her, who had risked everything to save her from a monster. I have been thinking about what I want to do, Isabella continued, with my life, with my resources, with everything you have offered me. It is yours to do whatever you wish, Theodore replied. No conditions, no expectations. I want to build a foundation. Isabella's voice grew stronger as she spoke. For women trapped in situations like mine, women who think they have no way out, women who believe it when their abusers say no one is coming. She picked a dandelion from the grass and twirled it between her fingers. I want them to know that someone is coming, that they are not alone, that there are resources and people and hope, even when everything seems hopeless. Theodore smiled. The pride in his eyes was unmistakable. Your mother would have loved that idea, he said. My birth mother? She spent her whole life helping others. She was a social worker before she got sick, dedicated her career to protecting vulnerable children and families. You are more like her than you know. Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes, another piece of herself she was discovering. Another connection to the past she had never known. Baby Claire fell again. This time she sat on the grass, contemplating her failure with the serious expression that babies sometimes wear when they are processing a new experience. Her tiny brow furrowed in concentration. Then she stood up, took another step, fell, stood again, stepped again. If you are listening to this story and something resonates, if you are in a situation where you feel trapped, isolated, controlled, please know this: you are not alone. You are not worthless. And there is a way out, even when you cannot see it. Document everything. Reach out to someone you trust. A friend, a family member, a coworker, a domestic violence hotline. Anyone who might be able to help. And never ever believe the voice that tells you no one is coming. That voice is lying. That voice is the weapon your abuser uses to keep you trapped. The truth is that there are people who care, resources that can help, and hope on the other side of fear. Someone is always willing to help. You just have to let them. Isabella scooped up baby Claire and covered her face with kisses. The baby shrieked with laughter, her giggles filling the garden with joy. Isabella Hartwell went on to create the Claire Foundation, named in honor of the woman whose evidence had ultimately saved her life. Within 5 years, the foundation had helped over 40,000 women escape abusive situations. Within 10 years, it had become one of the leading domestic violence prevention organizations in the country. Isabella never remarried. She discovered that she did not need a partner to be complete, that she was whole and strong and capable all on her own. But she did find love. In her daughter, who grew up kind and strong and fearless. In her father, who spent the rest of his days making up for lost time. In Maggie Sullivan, who became Claire's beloved grandmother and Isabella's most trusted friend. In the women she helped, the lives she saved, the hope she spread. Some stories end with revenge, with the villain defeated and humiliated, with the hero standing triumphant over their fallen enemy. This story ends with something better. This story ends with healing. As Isabella held Claire against the sunset, the sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold. Behind them, Theodore watched with quiet joy, Maggie standing beside him with tears in her eyes. 4 people who had found each other against impossible odds. 4 people who had chosen to be a family. For Claire, Isabella whispered into her daughter's hair. For every woman who never got the chance to tell her story, we will tell it for them. We will make sure they are remembered. Baby Claire reached up and touched her mother's face with tiny fingers, and Isabella smiled. Finally, truly, completely, free. And that is where our story ends. But before you go, I want to say something to anyone listening who felt a connection to Isabella's journey. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, I would be so grateful if you could take just a moment to hit that like button. It sounds simple, but every single like helps this story reach another woman who might need to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of this story hit you the hardest. Was it the moment in the basement, the rescue, the ending? I read every single comment, and your thoughts mean the world to me. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about hope and survival and never giving up, please share this with them. You never know whose life you might touch. Finally, if you are new here and you want more stories like this one, stories about strong women overcoming impossible odds, stories that will make you laugh and cry and believe in justice, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for caring about Isabella and Claire and all the women whose stories deserve to be told. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, no matter how dark things seem, someone is always coming. You just have to hold on. See you in the next story.